Now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Suzanne Jewell. She's the host of Mindful Mornings Miami. She's a global executive and serial entrepreneur. She's taught several mindfulness sessions in our Win Lab program down in Miami. Our Win Lab program is our all-women's accelerator program. And each time our entrepreneurs walk away from our sessions feeling clear-headed and ready to take action on their businesses. So with that, I hand the presentation over to you, Suzanne.
Awesome, Casey. Thank you. And Christina and Shakina, everyone who is here to support this really, I think, important and timely opportunity. It's truly an honor for me to participate today to talk about mental fortitude and leadership. And you can see the words mindful all over what it is that we'll be sharing today. But the biggest thing I'm going to promise to you today is that we're not just going to be talking about mindfulness, we're actually going to be practicing mindfulness. I'm sure many of you, if I literally could see you in front of me right now, or if we were in the same room, if I asked you, have you seen on the cover of Time when you've walked through the grocery store line, the word mindful on the cover of Time magazine? It's been on the cover 3 times in the last basically 18 months. For those of you who are really passionate about being on LinkedIn, interestingly enough, in the last 3 weeks, mindful content of any kind, whether it's emotional intelligence, personal resilience, or this topic we're going to talk about today, which is mental fortitude, has been the #1 most downloaded content on LinkedIn. And also very interestingly, the CEO of Microsoft has addressed the fact that in this space we're now in, where most of us are working from home in this arena, he has said that in the next 5 years, our capacity to be able to actually pay attention and what that means, how you pay attention, the quality of your attention, your capacity for paying attention, will probably be the #1 skill set that we have to actually develop, because there are very few of us who actually know how to pay attention yet. Part of what we're going to talk about today is what mindfulness actually means. And in addition to the fact that it's shown up 5 times or 6 times on the cover of, in the last 3 years, not just the last 18 months on Time magazine, there are now over 5,000 studies that have been done on both quantitative and qualitative levels of why mindfulness matters. It is an ancient practice that was originally taken from a Buddhist psychology methodology of attention training that's 2,500 years old. In its more current iteration, many of you may have heard of Jon Kabat-Zinn's practice called mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. And he actually created that at Massachusetts General Hospital, taking some that he had learned in the East, made it very secular, and offered it to people who were dealing with either terminal issues or extreme amounts of pain, and helped people learn that when you turn your attention towards something, you not only have the ability, by paying attention, to be able to not be carried away by it, but you can actually learn the quality of what the experience is. So very quickly, to pay attention on purpose, in the moment, non-judgmentally, and with curiosity, is what it means to be mindful. Now, just because we say those things, if I were able to do any one of them at any given time really well, I'd actually tell you I'm a really good mindfulness practitioner. But because we've got so much habitual distraction, things are constantly pulling away our focus, one of the challenges we have is, how do we pay attention? Christina, can we move to the next slide? What we're going to actually do is right now get a taste of what it means to be mindful. So rather than talk about it more, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is do what is called take a dignified seat. So wherever you are, I happen to be on a cushion in my little office space. I want you to have a very strong back and a soft front. If you're seated in an office chair, put your feet firmly on the earth. Let yourself feel the quality of the chair beneath you, and have a little bit of an alert sensation, but not overarching in your back. Be relaxed and present. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes. If that's not available to you right now, simply let your gaze fall to a 45-degree angle and simply soften your focus. And I'm going to invite you for just a few moments to follow the sound of my voice. Take note. If for any reason you hear some sounds about on any of us who might have our audio open right now, don't let those sounds necessarily distract you or aggravate you. Simply pay attention to them. Listen. See what sounds might also be either on the Zoom call or potentially in the environment that you're in. Might you hear the sound of the air conditioning or the heater in the room that you're in? Might you hear the sound of the birds on my Zoom call through the open window to my shoulder? Try to gather and collect your attention on purpose in this moment and simply pay attention to the sound. Get curious about the sound. Is it loud or soft? Is it sharp or repetitive? Is it a familiar sound? If it's the sound of a car, is it a car you know? And if by chance you're in a place of great silence, pay attention to that as well and listen within your body. Might you feel your tummy gurgling because you waited a little bit late to eat lunch? Might you sense the sound of your heartbeat because you ran to get to this class today? Simply pay attention, not seeking to shift anything. Simply being present. And as you do, I'm going to invite you to do what is called a check-in. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the least and 5 being the most, are you little in terms of calm or are you a lot calm? Again, not changing anything, simply taking notice. Wow, I'm pretty calm this afternoon. Or, I'm feeling a little bit agitated. Simply take note. You don't have to shift it. And now I am going to invite you to imagine above where you are seated, outside of the room or the building or the roof that you occupy, the sensation of a wide open blue sky. And in that blue sky, have the feeling of ease. Imagine an August before school starts summer afternoon. That delicious feeling, if you're in the East or the Midwest, of it about to get cool, of the steamy temperatures, or if you're in the Southeast or on the West Coast. Simply feel that sensation of an August summer afternoon. And check back in now with that number of a little calm at the number of 1 to very calm at the number of 5. And take note if anything has shifted by your capacity to bring your attention to the sensation of an August afternoon. Get curious. Maybe it dropped from a 5 to a 3. Maybe it didn't shift at all, and that's okay. Now wiggle your toes, rub your hands together, get some energy into where you're seated, and start to wiggle your fingers and open up your eyes and come back into the room. And welcome. So I would love to know if anyone would like to share as we move through, if this might have been your first time actually taking a pocket to pause in a business setting. You know, I'd love someone to share if you feel so inclined to say, you know, hey, I've never done that before, to take a mindful moment to arrive. Just share with us anything that maybe this was your first time doing that. You can drop it in the chat or raise your hand and simply let us know, that was different. Or maybe you experienced a real sense of ease if you feel like sharing. And I would just love to know, because one of the beautiful parts about actually practicing together is that what will happen without a doubt is, of the 40 or 50 people we have tuned in, if you share what experience you had, someone else will probably have the same. We've got someone who wants to share.
You can go ahead.
It's
Remember,
someone with phone number 508.
Remember to unmute your line.
It could just be that the hand was just acknowledging that's
Yeah,
their first time.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so awesome that it's something that we're all experiencing now. And Christina, if you can move us into the next slide. By the way, that little slide, next time you see it, will be our cue to actually practice again. And I just want to share with you all a little bit of my background, so that you don't think that I'm a yoga teacher who literally is coming into the corporate space. I actually come from the corporate space, and I'm actually honored enough to share with you that I came from someone who is a Babson graduate, and it happens to be Gustavo Cisneros, and I worked for the Cisneros television group over 20 years ago when I first moved to Miami from Michigan. When I actually left that space, which was the corporate world, it was due to a very personal experience that I had with burnout. That may be something others have experienced before. I was a corporate television executive living in Miami, responsible for 47 countries around the planet for the work that I did. And in that scenario, I ended up actually having an experience of burnout, which brought me to the meditation cushion. I'd love to stop and take a moment to just acknowledge here. We had Ruth share with us that was a lovely mind-body connection for her. That was very grounding. Thank you, Ruth. I'm really excited to have you share that with us. We're so glad that you've given a reflection here, because others will realize it's really kind of a lovely connection to be able to share what your experience is. So as I actually moved from being someone that I call a recovering corporate global TV executive and found my way onto the meditation cushion, not unlike many of you, I kind of had a struggle between the left brain, which is really logical, very rational, very good at statistics and mathematics and analytics and Google, and my right brain, which was very much into the human experience. And I found that actually by learning about what it means to look at the neuroscience of mindfulness, I had the opportunity to be able to be of use to experiences like this, to what Babson bring through the Women Innovating Now Lab. And so now this is actually what I do. And I work with people like the World Happiness Summit, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I also happen to have a radio show called Mindful Mornings Miami. You can see a little photograph of me. If any of you know a motivational speaker named Les Brown from Overtown, the gentleman who says, "You gotta be hungry." That's a great shot when he was in the studio with me. So this is now actually a whole new reinvention for me, from leaving the corporate space and yet finding a way to still serve others who live within that space. So if we can move to the next slide, Christina. Why does mindfulness matter? And one of the big questions that Casey and Christina and the entire team actually brought to my attention was how many of us are really feeling challenged around the topic of personal resilience. And then how do we even find our own aptitude, our own capacity for personal leadership? And why does mindfulness matter within that question? So one of the first things I think it's really important for us to know, and I don't think anybody hands us, which is a manual of being human. Here we land and we basically know how to run our cars, our smartphones, our smart homes, but no one's handed us a manual that says, guess what? You have 70,000 thoughts a day that move through your mind. You also have thoughts that move through your mind, and that stream got charged energetic expressions, which are called emotions. And when you actually have a thought that triggers an emotion, or an emotion that triggers a thought, you start to move into a feedback loop. And those of us who actually are in the startup space and know about iterative feedback loops, where we might take our data or our proof of concept or our minimum viable product and we might bring it out into the marketplace, we might not ever realize that we individually are also having our own internal feedback loop, but we haven't actually gotten attuned to what is going on for us. So the average emotion, and I would love normally if we were in a group room together to ask everybody, how many seconds or minutes do you think an emotion actually lasts? And if anyone wants to jump in and throw a thought in there, that would be great, because it's a curious thing. If you get an emotion and you experience that emotion, if you don't feed that emotion, it actually lasts only 90 seconds. However, most of us have the capacity to both ruminate and obsess. And when we do that, we now have fed that feedback loop. And what you can see here is that you actually start a cycle that starts more thoughts to feed into an emotion. That's about a 10-minute cycle. And before you know it, you actually have now moved from 10 minutes into another series of 10 minutes, and you've been stuck on the same loop and on the same wheel. So here's a little bit of neuroscience you probably might have heard a little bit about, but I'll give you some of the engineering behind it. Those of you who know about neurons, there's a neuron, and here are little bridges that get built in between called synapses. When you have an experience, your neurons that fire together will eventually, with synapses, wire together. And when they wire together, you eventually build an actual connection, a neuronal network. So if you've actually been listening, let's say on a particular day, to 3 hours of the news in the morning, and that little neuron is firing with a lot of fear and a lot of concern and a lot of frustration, you have actually now sent out enough energy to be able to create a neuronal network of fear. If, for example, you take 10 minutes in the morning, you do what we did in a very short drop-in at the beginning of this call, which was just a short, about 6-minute practice of mindful attention, you will actually calm down those neurons, and the way that they will fire will be a sense of ease in the body. So the network that actually gets built isn't an agitated network. It's actually it's actually a neuronal network that's much more calm and will actually be resilient. Now, if you do that 10 times, 10 days in a row for 100 minutes, you will actually change the neuroplasticity of your brain. So 10 times, 10 minutes equal 100 minutes. Unfortunately, we all often want to sit down in one sitting. It's not about trying to sit for 100 minutes. It's about the actual practice. And just like a good entrepreneur or a good student who goes back to, let me study, what you are actually doing by learning how to pay attention in the first one we did to sound, and allowing whatever was in our environment to be where we gathered our attention, we actually in that moment are creating a discipline of, I'm listening, I'm hearing, but let me come back to what it is that I'm actually focusing on. So let's move to the next slide, Christina. I'm going to show you a little bit about also beyond the neurons, why mindfulness is so key for this topic of mental fortitude and personal resilience. If you take a look at this image of your brain, If I were in front of you, I would ask you all to do this. So I'm going to ask you to do it anyway, and I'm going to trust that you're doing it. I want you to take your elbow and put it up like this so that you can actually see the point of your elbow. Put your hand up like this, and what you see of that image in front of you, fold your thumb in. This is your adrenal gland. This is your spine. The thumb that you've just folded in is basically at the back here where your cerebellum is. It's called your amygdala. This area right here is the oldest part of your brain. It's called the reptilian part of the brain. It's also where we have our primal impulses that are about the idea of fight, flight, freeze. So let's say a saber-toothed tiger comes through the forest. That part of the body and all of what's going to go on in your spine and your adrenal gland, all of the organs. So here you've got the tummy, the intestines, the heart rate, and the lungs are all going to activate to save your life. That's where you're going to fight, flight, or freeze. However, fold your fingers up in front like this, and you see this thing in the front called the cerebral cortex. That is considered right here to be the mammalian and most evolved part of the brain, and that's right here. This is where you actually have what's called executive function, rationality, and logic. Now, what do you think happens if you start to feel dry cough symptoms? Let's say your chest starts to feel a little tight. I'm going to bet with everything that's going on with the COVID crisis, your instinct down here in the thumb is probably going to make you start to go, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I want you to do this. Flip your lid. You have just basically taken your ration and your logic and your executive function offline. That occurs more often than not, like we said, to save you from a saber-toothed tiger. However, more often than not in the world we live in, we aren't being chased by saber-toothed tigers. However, one of the reasons we're feeling all of this stress up and down, all of the organs that are attached to our spinal cord here, and our mind, is because we don't have a particularly well-developed practice of bringing our mind online. So what I'm going to do right now is have you take down your little flipping your lid, and I'm going to invite you for a second time. Leave our slide where we are now. We're going to actually take a dignified seat again. Put your feet solidly on the ground wherever you're seated. Kind of roll your shoulders back. Let the chest come forward slightly. Let the heart and the rib cage lift just a bit. And again, if it's comfortable, close your eyes. And if for any reason that's not available to you, just let your eyes go to a 45-degree angle and soften your gaze. And as you are going to just follow the sound of my voice, take note again on a scale of 1 to 5 what it is you're experiencing in your body at this moment, with 1 being not much of a reactionary experience, and 5 being if you feel highly reactive at this moment. Check in first. Let some things settle. There's no need for you to become thoughtless. I'm simply asking you to just become aware of your body seated in this chair. Feel yourself on the earth with your feet solidly either beneath you if you're seated in a meditative pose, or if you have your feet on the ground. Taking note of the stability of gravity holding you on this earth. Maybe letting your breath deepen a bit, simply because you are held here now by gravity. Respiration and oxygen are all available in abundance now. And I'm going to invite you to have an experience with me, trusting me that I will guide you through a fight, flight, freeze moment. I'm going to invite you to think of something that is mildly, not tremendously triggering, but mildly challenging. And then I'm going to teach you a breath to move through it. So bring into your mind's eye as you sit here something that might make you fairly agitated, not monstrously agitated, but on that scale of 1 to 5. Maybe it was going outside for a walk and someone didn't social distance. Maybe it was expecting groceries to come and they were a day late. Something that's at the median level. Bring it into your awareness and allow yourself to feel the agitation. Try to become aware of where it arises. Do you have a jingle or a jangle in your neck muscles? Does your tummy get kind of topsy-turvy? Maybe your jaw gets tight. Look at this. Being present with this, allowing yourself to be present that this is aggravation. I am experiencing aggravation. And now I'm going to teach to you the anti-anxiety breath. For a series of 3 cycles, we're going to breathe in through our nose for a count of 6. We'll hold and let it circulate for 1. We will purse our lips like a straw and press it out for a count of 8. Always remembering to push out longer than we are inhaling. So breathe in for a count of 6. Let it circulate for a count of 1. Now purse your lips like a straw and press out for a count of 8. Turn the corner, breathing in for a count of 6. Let it circulate for 1. Purse your lips like a straw, push out for a count of 8. Turn the corner for a final practice, breathing in for a count of 6. Nice deep inhale through the nose. Circulate for 1. Press out for 8 like a straw. Let your breath come back to normal. Check in again. On the scale of 1 to 5 of the agitation, what has shifted in your physical experience? Has your tummy calmed at all? Has the jingle or the jangle in your neck gotten a little bit less intense? Now again, rub your hands together. It's a great way to come back into the body and the presence of the room, opening your eyes. And again, I so wish that we were all in the same room because everybody looks like they get facelift after they're done. Like we all look so relaxed. So what I'm sharing with you now that we literally just did together, and as you now look at this slide, you can see where things like manage reactionary impulses and this idea that when you were in your adrenals pushing all of that aggravation and frustration up your spinal cord and activating your amygdala, and when you did I didn't want you to flip your lid a lot, but I wanted you to come offline a little. I would love if anyone, again, we're open and we can share in more depth when we get to the closing section. But if anyone wants to share anything that was strong that came up, feel free to either raise your hand or share it in our chat and share what that experience was like for you. That anti-anxiety breath, by the way, doesn't have to be done with your eyes closed. I've done it many times in the 10 items or less line at the grocery store when someone's had 22 items in front of me. And I went, okay, here's a moment for me to practice mindfulness. So if we can move to the next slide, Christina. So I want to share you why this is really important in terms of your personal for paying attention and how it does impact stress, your productivity, and your creativity. This slide is shared by one of Google's institutions that they have called Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institution. And you'll see that what you can kind of look at is everything here from improving your ability to reduce stress, enhancing your capacity for clarity of mind, increasing your energy levels. And it depends kind of why one chooses to do this. For me, as I shared slightly, I had reached a stage where, for example, I was living in Miami. My client base was in Ethiopia. It happened to be the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. My mother was in Michigan, and she was in the last stages of 15 months of stage 4B uterine cancer. My commute was Miami, Michigan, Ethiopia. Yes, it was that insane. And in the midst of that, I started having a dysregulated nervous system. So this issue of remaining calm became my number one reason of why to practice, because I ended up in the emergency room with panic attacks. And the doctor looked at me and said, there's essentially nothing wrong with you. You are simply entirely dysregulated. The circadian rhythms that managed my ability to sleep, because I was going back and forth across time zones and on extremely long distance plane rides, and then the stress of a parent passing away, had basically burned out adrenal glands, that thing that's at the base of that elbow, to the point where my cortisol was very high at night and very low during the daytime. So I was sleeping during the day and awake at night. So that's how much it can impact you. So if we can move to the next slide, Christina. I would love, I actually did jump ahead. So let's take the next one and we'll come back to our next practice time. I would love to have all of you also take a look at this, because when someone shows you what I've shown you about your adrenal gland down here and your spine and then this amygdala, it's that little dot that you see right down there at the base of the brainstem. And we are living now in what is called the attention economy. I mentioned at the top of the call what it was that the CEO of Microsoft has said, and he's discussed that within 5 years, and I think this could now be adjusted, the ability to pay attention is going to be so important, because right now we are touching these things 85 to 250 times a day. When you think about that, that means we're touching our phones more than we touch the people we love. We're paying our attention to a device than we are to actually who matters most to us in our lives. There is even, some people still don't quite believe, but it's an accurate study, that a goldfish can pay sustained attention for 12 seconds and that human beings can only pay sustained attention for 9. Here's the one that I do know is the most accurate study of all, and it's the most recent one out of Harvard's Lazar lab. And it is this: out of 1,440 minutes that we have in one day to live, so that's a 24-hour cycle, we have 1,440 minutes, 47% of those minutes are actually distracted. So of the time we're awake, not sleeping, so you got to take out of those 1,440 minutes already how many hours you sleep. If it's 6 hours times 60, that's 360 minutes. So you do the math for your own sleep pattern. If it's 8 hours, do the math minus take that off of the 1,440. 47% of that remaining time that you are actually awake, you are not paying attention to where your body physically is. Your mind is either in the past and it's ruminating and creating depression, or it's in the future, and in that space it is obsessing and creating anxiety. So that's the reason why our attention matters and why focus equals so much success. So I'm going to go right back now to the practice, Christina, because I want to do a third one here. We'll jump into that. Beautiful. So yeah, you didn't know you were going to practice 3 times when you came to this hour long, and I made a promise that we would do this 3 to 5 times before we finished. So take another seat, and just now you're kind of used to it. Let those shoulders roll back. Let the front of the rib cage come forward. Let the eyes gently close. And if it's available to you, simply let the gaze soften and focus. And now you're kind of ready. You're sort of here. And this practice is one of the favorites that we have. It is called the smile practice. And I'm going to invite you for just a moment to let a slight smile be very present across the front of your face. Lift up the corners of your mouth very easily, slightly spreading right and left toward your ears. And bring your attention to the tiny little movements when you smile. Take note of the right and the left corner of your eyes where they crinkle when you have that little smile. Take note of your forehead and how it sort of smooths itself and relaxes when you smile. Allow yourself to let a small expanded distance between the bottom of your earlobes and the distance to your shoulders. See if you can drop your shoulders by 1 millimeter. Opening up just slightly, ever so gently, in a dignified and noble way. And now sense that smile dropping across the front of your chest. Feeling the smile now in the corners from shoulder to shoulder. And placing your hand on your heart, letting that be the center bottom curve of the smile. As we've been doing a slight bit of emotional check-in each time we've practiced, take note now on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being at the least of ease and 5 being at a lot of ease. How much ease do I feel right now in my body? How much ease do I feel in my heart? How present do I feel to this experience? And now again, just rubbing your hands together and gently fluttering your eyes open. Moving back into the space together. We'll go to our last slide as we're trying to be mindful right here at about the 40-minute in. We'll take a look at why this actually matters at work. And I want to really, literally congratulate with huge amounts of visionary thanks to everyone at Babson for this, because interestingly enough, mindfulness is the cutting edge secret sauce of what's now being brought into the workplace. Who knew that mindfulness on demand, like we're doing today, was going to be a thing? And part of it is because we are all learning how to be human at work and how to work at home. And we're learning how to regulate our emotional systems. So some of the information I think that is just really worth noting is that on the left side, you'll see 22% of United States businesses are now offering mindfulness as part of their wellness programs. The information in terms of the rest set of the data I share are from both Harvard Business Review, Fidelity Investments, and also Aetna, because Aetna has been the largest and first most comprehensive insurance program to 30,000 of its employees to actually engage in mindfulness at the company-wide level. This data now has come out over 3 years, and they've actually been able to track that they have been able to reduce healthcare costs and attribute those to mindfulness practices by approximately 7%. And in addition to all of the logos you see to the right, from Haagen-Dazs to General Mills to Cambridge Innovation Center Miami to Procter & Gamble, we now need to add Babson to the go slide. I will share with you that this year at the Davos World Economic Forum, there were 18 sessions of mindfulness. There is now a mindfulness initiative that is being birthed out of Davos. And my teachers, Jack Kornfeld and Tara Brock, are doing two fascinating programs. One of them is Mindful Nation UK, where they are actually teaching MPs, so members of parliament, are practicing mindfulness. And they are right now finishing the program for the United States Congress to actually be able to practice mindfulness and attention training. So I want to make sure we stay very mindful and attuned to our time that Casey and Christina and I all offered. So we're going to open everything up now, and we'll make sure that we do two things: answer, do a lot of Q&A and sharing, and then we will practice one more time before we finish. So I love that there are some questions already starting to come in and some reflections.
Great, so we have our first question. It's, other than mindfulness exercises, what can we do each day to practice resilience?
Amanda, I love that question. And here's one that I would share with you is really an interesting practice. And that is what I would say is touch your inner strength. So I'm going to invite all of us with our eyes wide open to call to mind a moment where we've actually excelled at something. It might have been a moment where we were handed a huge challenge. It might have been where we actually nailed a presentation. I want you to just kind of think of that for a moment. Think about it. Cultivate that moment. Think about how that felt. And here's what I want you to do, because I can't see you, by the way. You could only see me. I want you to take on the posture of how that felt. And you can see in my posture, I'm kind of putting my hands on my hips right now. If we were all standing up, I'd sort of be in Wonder Woman pose right now. Take on the posture and the felt sense of what that was like when you either did something, you nailed it, or you really excelled at something, and occupy that sensation. Now I want you to kind of check in and see whether or not you feel sort of strong. Come up with what those words might be. Proud, maybe courageous. That little practice of your inner strength by recalling something that you literally have done that you were masterful at. Go back to where we started. Neurons that fire together between, wire together. If you practice that in just little bits and little drops, just like water on a stone, you will help build your own inner sense of resilience. So in a moment where that thing, the adrenal gland, and you've got the fight, flight, freeze, and you've got an oh shit moment where you literally flip your lid, remembering a moment of, wait a minute, I've been here before. Because I'll share with you about where we've been before as a human race, is that every one of us on this call, without me knowing a thing about your history, every one of us on this call has a relative who may have been through World War II. We've got someone in our lives who may have immigrated from another country and made it here in this country. We've got someone who might have survived the Holocaust. We might have someone in our history who made it through the 1918 flu pandemic that lasted from 1918 to 1921 until humans across the globe gained herd immunity. We as humans actually have the resilience to get through this because we've been here before. So when we remind ourselves both individually and collectively of that, Amanda, it's a really great thing to feel, especially an occupy in the body sensation, because when your muscles occupy strength, you actually help build personal resilience.
We have another question that came through. It's, are there other metrics to measure mindfulness? Decreasing cost should not be the quantified focus of mindfulness in companies, or should it?
I'm so tickled to see some of these questions because, you know, here in, is it Francesca? I hope I'm saying that properly. If I did slaughter it, I apologize. I would share with you, you know, we're in in this regard, we're in new territory. People are seeing the benefits because of these 5,000 pieces of research. Many of those pieces of research have not only been done in the workplace. Pieces of research have been done with monks who have been doing this for 30 years, going into MRI machines, fMRI machines, and EEG machines. Here's an interesting thing. Oh, thank you. It was a good pronunciation. I'm happy to hear that. One of the interesting things is that you also are finding in the actual DNA of humans, there is something that determines the length of the cell life in the structure of our mitochondria. It's called telomeres. And the length of your telomere actually determines the length of the life in your mitochondria. What is being found out is that when you have a ongoing, over time, long practice, it doesn't mean you have to go live in a cave for 3 years, but you have had a kind of like you brush your teeth every day, so you have healthy teeth and gums. If you actually practice every day, they have found that a sustained practice over time lengthens the telomeres in your mitochondria. So interestingly enough, we humans tend to be happier, by the way, when we're not distracted. So remember, a distracted mind, 47% of the time we're awake, we're distracted, and a distracted mind is an unhappy mind. A happy mind is a focused mind. A focused mind is a flourishing human experience. I'm sure many of you have been in that moment. It's happening, by the way, for me right now. I love what I do so much. I'm having a moment of flow right now. I'm literally flourishing as we do this. The time for me seems to just kind of disappear. I'm sure whether you're an entrepreneur or a runner, you've experienced that. Those kind of states are also benefits of mindfulness. So thank you for asking that question in terms of cost is not the only barometer. And the people, by the way, outside of me naming kind of brands of individuals who are indeed practicing include people from Will Smith, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, Arianna Huffington. The CEO of BlackRock Ventures, by the way, has one of the largest and most expensive mindfulness programs around. BlackRock has 1,600 people within the institution who actually practice. So you will see when you start to look into people's personal practices, mindfulness, just like brushing your teeth and taking your vitamins, is fast on its way to becoming something that people who are really trying to have peak performance do every single day. What other questions, let's see, have we got here? You know what? We can move to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, forgive me. I didn't want to move to that slide quite yet. We're not quite there. We're not quite there at the end. Did we have, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you can, oh, we have a question here. Have you heard of the Founders First system? Mindfulness is a core practice, very helpful.
Again, I'm just, man, I just love the level of consciousness, to tell you, the level of awareness that is within the cohort. It doesn't matter which group I end up getting a chance to interact with. I have heard of Founders First system. And those of you who haven't, definitely, Amanda, thank you for sharing that as a resource. I would encourage people to go look. There are several institutions that are now really starting to bring it within their practice. For some people who have taken a look at what is called the triple bottom line, the triple P, planet, people, profits, there is an institution called Conscious Capitalism, and they are creating a series of practices in that. There are some people who might have even heard of what is happening in the compassion space, because compassion is part of this practice also. There's a charter for compassion that's been started by a very interesting TED Talk $1 million prize winner, and it's actually a compassion charter for cities. So cities are signing on how to actually gain and create these sort of practices within school systems. So outside of the business world, we are now seeing a mindfulness initiative happen in the United States. get ready to kind of have a drum roll here. Flint, Michigan is the first city to become a mindful city. And it's one of those that raises everyone's eyebrows. It was created in conjunction with both the Mindfulness Society and also the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute at Google. And they've gone in and they're teaching some of the practices we're doing today around resilience and breath and self-awareness to all of the leaders in the city, so that they can develop more compassion and more empathy for what they know is to come for the young people who have been infected, or impacted, I should say, by the lead issues in the water, so that as that works its way out through the system of the community over years, that people can actually have presence of awareness of being connected to one another. One of the big things I would share with you from my teacher, Jack Cornfield, if you do want to look into the program, I'm in a 2-year program, and that program actually will wrap up next year. It's with UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. And the practices that we do are some of the ones I've shared with you here. Jack was just featured in the New York Times, I think on Sunday, so 3 days ago. And one of the most interesting things that Jack talks about, son, physicist, Jack says we are at a very interesting time in human history, that no matter how much AI or tech or any other modern day development that we are capable of creating today, that one of the biggest changes that we really need is a change of heart. And that mindfulness is one of those ways for us to be literally more human and heartful at work. And I would also share with you that one of the most interesting things happening both at Stanford and at Harvard and also at Yale is, whether it's the compassion or positive psychology or mindfulness, this is really kind of becoming a secret sauce for a lot of leaders. So we've only got about 5 minutes left, and I want to be, again, very mindful of all of that. I'd love to move to our last slide. I just want to share with anyone that might be interested in following me. You can always find information on my website at suzannejewell.com. And in the next month, I am going to be offering a training where you will get the opportunity to come and drop in and me. So drop me a note if you're interested in learning about that. And if there are other questions before we kind of do one little practice and then offer time for Christina and Casey to do anything they want to do to close out, have at it. If you've always wanted to talk to a mindfulness teacher and ask, feel free. It's your chance. And I also would share with you one little tiny tidbit. If you're familiar with Wellness Coach, it is a Zoom-based and Zoom-funded app. It's a workplace wellness app. I teach on the app several times a week. I teach tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I will be teaching the name, tame, and claim emotions. It is right now being offered for free for a lot of workplaces. So if you want to check it out, it's Wellness Coach. And you can always tune in and practice with me. We do very short practices, 10-minute practices. And yes, Greater Good Science Center, that's where I'm studying right now. I love it. Amanda's really attuned. So let's do one little, literally 1 minute, 1.5 practice. Close your eyes now that you've done this a few times. Let's bring your hands both to your heart. Take a moment to simply be in gratitude for yourself, that you took a moment to do something new. You actually just put 60 minutes of new neuron firing and neuron wiring into the neuroplasticity of your mind. You took a moment to do what Rumi says is drop in and make a regular visit to yourself. And then I'm going to close with one of my favorite poems, also from my teacher. If you can sit quietly after difficult news, if in financial downturns you remain perfectly calm, if you can see your neighbors travel to fantastic places without a twinge of jealousy, if you can happily eat whatever is put on your plate, if you can fall asleep after a day of running around without a drink or a pill, if you can always find contentment wherever you are, you must be a dog. With that smile, you can easily open up your eyes. And that's from Jack himself to basically say, and then there's, because again, how to pay attention on purpose in the moment, non-judgmentally and with curiosity is a practice. I want to thank you all for taking the time to learn how to live, work, create, and play in a mindful way. And again, Christina, Casey, it's just been an honor. Thank you for the opportunity to work with all of your amazing faculty and alumni and students and all of the program of the Entrepreneurials in residence as well.
Thank you, Suzanne, for bringing your expertise to this session, and thank you for closing it out with such a great poem.
Yeah, thank you. That was wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks for defining why mindfulness matters, how to tune into our stress loops, and how to embed it into how to embed mindfulness at work. I know a couple of you have questions. Suzanne, oh, I see it. Okay, you just typed in the poem. So Suzanne just posted the poem into the chat. We will circulate both the presentation and Suzanne's contact information in the follow-up email. Christina, do you have the next slide for our upcoming webinar? Or, okay, great. So our next webinar is April 29th. We will be joined by Nicole Robert Jones, who will speak to using your intellectual property to build multiple revenue streams. So we hope to see you there. We'll include all the information in our follow-up email. And again, thank you, Suzanne, for the time.
You're so welcome. It was absolutely everybody. And just remember, literally in a moment, you already know now how to sit quietly, take a moment to pause, and catch your breath so you can pay attention on purpose in the moment, non-judgmentally, and just get curious. Get curious. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.